Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining me live today. As you have seen on the title of this video, I have lost my permanent residency in Canada, and that's what we're talking about today. All the things that can happen that could lead you to potentially lose your permanent residency. So, if you haven't moved or you've moved already, this is an opportunity for you to look and think about all the different things that could happen so you can prepare for them, know what to avoid, and just prepare. So as we are waiting for a couple of people or more people rather to show and join, please let me know where you are watching from. So as always, I love hearing where everyone is watching from. So just let me know down in the comments where you are watching from, and we'll give a couple of minutes for people to come on in and join us in the conversation. And as always, I would love for this to be an interactive session. So if you do have any questions as I go through anything, please let me know. So Ping Kopane says, Eish, so sorry to hear that, Sis Busi, hoping for the best for you and the family. Please do stick around so you get to also hear how we lost our permanent residency in Canada. I'm going to be going through a couple of things that can potentially happen to see someone lose their permanent residency. So Christopher says, Hatfield, Pretoria. Hi, Busi. Thank you so much for joining, Christopher. I used to study at the University of Pretoria, so I am quite familiar with the Pretoria Hatfield area because that's the campus that I went to. It was in Hatfield. Tasia Mo, hope I'm pronouncing that correctly. Living the Dream says, Hi, Busi. I'm watching from Centurion. Thank you so much for joining. Okay, I think we have given it enough time for people to come in, and I'm pretty sure people are going to keep trickling in. Cans Freddy says, I'm watching from Durban. Thank you so much for joining as well. So, as you have heard and as you have seen from the title of this video, you can lose your permanent residency in Canada. Now, this is something you typically are given for 5 years. So if you would be given your permanent residency, it would be valid for 5 years. And after that 5 years, you either would have to renew it or just depending on the circumstances that are working in your life at the time. But the normal duration of having your permanent residency is usually 5 years. But in that 5 years, you could find yourself losing that permanent residency, or you get to a point where you need to renew it and maybe you're not able to do that. And one of the things that could potentially happen that see you not be able to renew your permanent residency or see you lose it is financial reasons. So as you can remember, when you are going through the process to try and get your permanent residency here in Canada, you could find a job first. And so that is proof that you are able to take care of yourself and your family. Or you could be someone who produces proof of funds. And those funds is what shows the government that you are going to be able to come into Canada and be able to settle with your family, right? So if at any time during your stay here in Canada, while you're still a permanent residency, something happens and you are either unable or unwilling to support yourself and your family, that could be cause for you losing your permanent residency. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are going through the process, that initial proof of funds or proof of having a job or work is not the only time where you need to show that you are actually able to support yourself in Canada. So that is one of the reasons. So Molly here says, South African based in the UK. Thank you so much for joining. I always love seeing and hearing from other South Africans who are in different parts of the world. Thank you very much for joining. Okay, so one of the other reasons that you could potentially lose your permanent residency in Canada is medical reasons. Now, these are medical reasons which causes an excessive demand on health or social services here in Canada. And if the cost of your medical condition, whatever medical condition you might have, passes the threshold of $128,445 or it's $25,689 per year, you could find yourself losing your permanent residency just because of the the stress, like the excessive demand that your medical condition would be putting onto the system. So as you can remember, again, if you are somebody who's looking at going through the process of you, or you've went through it, you know that there are medical exams that they require you to take. And part of the reason for you taking these medical exams is so they can be able to see that you are not somebody who's going to come in and then need to use an excessive amount when it comes to the public funds that are available for people who reside in Canada. As I've mentioned in previous videos, basic healthcare in Canada is free. So if you would have something that is going on with you and you need to go to the hospital, maybe see certain specialists, for a lot of the conditions and procedures that would need to happen, the state is going to cover that. The government, rather, is going to cover that. But if you are a permanent resident, there are limitations. There are limitations, and just be aware of these numbers. And if maybe something does come up, or you know that there's something maybe that might be a norm in your medical history, looking at your family and all of that, maybe you could think that, okay, let me take up additional insurance so I am safe should there be something that happens, so I'm not becoming someone that they look at and think is stressing the system. So just bear in mind that in 2023, the threshold is $128,445 dollars, and that's over a period of 5 years. So if, for example, you would use, let's say, $2,000 on medical related expenses in the first year, and then the next year you have 32,000, they're not going to say, oh, we've said you have to use a bit over 25,000 in 1 year, and here you've used 30,000 in just 1 year, so you need to leave. Like, your PR is being taken back, it's being revoked. It doesn't work like that, but they look at it over the period of 5 years. Okay, so let me just look at the comments, see if there's any questions that have come in so far. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for joining. Okay, so one of the other reasons that you could find yourself being in a position where you've lost your permanent residency is crime. So something like driving under the influence of maybe drugs or alcohol, you could get yourself losing your permanent residency if you are caught. So this is one where I say, just be careful of the circles that you hang around, and make sure that you are not putting yourself in a position where you are criminally charged with something, because that could see you lose your permanent residency, right? So there's a number of things that you can think of that are falling under that crime category, but it could be things like attempts to overthrow the government, violence, terrorism, any crimes against humanity, but anything that would be related to crime that you are charged for could see you potentially losing your permanent residency. Okay, and then Devashni, I hope I pronounced your name correctly, says, hi, Busi, greetings from SA, hand pink or waving. Sad to hear this news. Are you now returning to South Africa? What about your house that you bought? So let's just go through all of the reasons that you can potentially lose your permanent residency, and I will be happy to answer all of your questions. Absolutely all of your questions. Okay. So the next reason that a person could see themselves lose their permanent residency in Canada is if they do not meet the presence requirement that the government has. So if in the last 5 years of having your permanent residency, you have not met the requirements in terms of the number of days that they expect you to be in Canada, which is 750 days, you could lose your permanent residency, because the whole idea behind it is, we're giving you this permanent residency so you can live here. But of course, they're not expecting somebody who's a permanent resident to just stay here the entire 5 full years. So minimum 750 days is something that you need to think about and know that if I would want to be a permanent resident in Canada and actually keep my permanent residency, I need to be present in the country for at least 750 days. Okay. And then, oh, this is awesome. So Davashni says I pronounced their name correctly. Awesome. Okay, and then one of the other reasons and this is just before we get to the reason why I have lost my permanent residency in Canada, is you can renounce your PR status. And you could do this for a number of reasons. Maybe you just don't want to live in Canada permanently anymore. So you could be somebody who renounces your permanent residency and says, thank you very much, but you can take this back. I'm not going to be using it. I don't need it. Maybe you're someone who has decided, I only want to visit Canada. I don't actually want to live there as a permanent residency. That could be another reason for renouncing it. You could be somebody who either wants to become a citizen or a permanent resident in another country, and that country requires you to renounce your citizenship in any other place. And that would be one of the reasons that you could be choosing to renounce your permanent residency. Or you could need to accept a diplomatic or official position with a foreign government, and they don't want you to be a permanent residency anywhere else. And that could be a reason for you to lose your permanent residency. So, before I get into the reason why I have lost my permanent residency in Canada, let me just go through the comments. And Neo says, hi, Busi, absolutely appreciate the time you take to educate us regarding the medical fees threshold. Is that per person? Yes, so that would be per person. So if you are moving as a family of 4, for example, like my family did, that is for each person who is moving. And if one of you is in a position where that would happen to, then it would affect you, like you would be the one who's affected. But there's also a number of things that you could look into. So if you have dependents, like there's people who wouldn't necessarily be losing their permanent residency, just depending on the situation that you are under. So it doesn't mean that just because one person maybe might lose their permanent residency because of the medical reasons, that the entire family now would have to lose their permanent residency. But yes, it is per person. It's not for the entire family. And when you look at the amount, it's definitely, I think, a pretty reasonable amount. But you can also appreciate that if somebody has a very complex medical situation that happens, that you can get to a point where you are using $25,000 in a year pretty easily. Like it's something that can happen pretty easily. But I think it's just something that's good to know and keep in mind. So if it does happen that you are in a situation where something like that would come to pass, you are prepared for it. Maybe you, I don't know, go to a different country where your medical expenses might be a bit lower just to get certain things done. So you're not putting that excessive demand on the Canadian health system. Okay, so one of the other reasons, which is the reason that I have lost my permanent residency in Canada, and I will add a link in the description of this video where you can see all of these reasons, where the Canadian government states all of the reasons that you could lose your permanent residency in Canada, which includes the reason that I have lost mine along with my family. And it is because we've become Canadian citizens. We have become Canadian citizens. Oh, so sorry about that. I think I just saw lipstick on my teeth. But we've become Canadian citizens, and that is the reason for us losing our permanent residency in Canada. So as I mentioned, I'll add a link in the description where you can be able to see a bit more detail with all of the reasons and what it means for you. And one of the things I wanted to highlight for all of my South Africans who are watching this, if you would be becoming a citizen of any particular country and you want to take up dual citizenship, you do not get to keep your South African citizenship automatically. That's how I used to think it was. For the longest of time, I used to think that's how it worked. And thankfully, TikTok, I feel like, is one of those platforms where I get to learn so much about so many things. And it was a bit of a while ago, like that's where I learned that you actually do not keep your citizenship as a South African automatically. But there also are certain conditions that will apply where you could potentially be able to keep it. So number one, if you are under 18, so for example, my kids are under 18, when we applied to become Canadian citizens, we applied for them as well. and they didn't have to apply to retain their South African citizenship. So if you are below the age of 18, you don't have to apply. If you are somebody who's taking up the citizenship of another country because you're marrying someone who's in that country, you also wouldn't have to apply to retain your citizenship. And then if you are somebody who became the citizen of another country before a particular date in 1995, which is a long time ago, you also wouldn't have to apply. But if you are like anybody else who is voluntarily taking up the citizenship of another place, then you would have to apply to retain it. So then another reason could be maybe you're running away from something that's happening in your country and you need to move somewhere else and you're getting that citizenship for another place, you also would be exempt from having to apply to retain, like if there would be something that's happening. But for everybody else, if everything is all good, really, and you are just voluntarily taking that citizenship up, you have to apply to retain your citizenship. And again, I'll leave a link in the description just so you know where to go to apply for that citizenship, especially if you are a South African and you are living maybe in Canada, for example. And the reason I didn't add it before this live was because it kind of would have been giving things away, you know, in terms of why we are not permanent residence anymore, and we've lost that. So Snentlantla says, wow, you gave us a fright. Thank God. Congratulations. Thank you so much to all of you. Thank you. Thank you so much to all of you. I saw radio silence like on my Instagram and on TikTok when I shared the announcement for this live that I'm going to be going live. And this is the reason for it. It was kind of like people were interacting with every single one of my other posts. But with that one, it was like, okay, what is going on here? You know? But yeah, thank you so much. Thank you all so much. It's been one of those milestones that we have looked forward to even before we moved, because we looked at, you know, what is the path to becoming a citizen if you would be coming to Canada? What do you need to fulfill to become somebody who's a Canadian? And when it finally happened, it's just been a really, really great, it's been a really great, it's a great feeling. It's a great feeling. And it's one of the things that I honestly feel like I got and allowed myself to enjoy the process even before we became citizens. So, as an example, I remember when I went to university, I held back in terms of when I would get happy and excited about doing something that I wanted to do, which was go to university, get this degree. And I thought to myself, I'll only get excited and happy when I get my degree. And when my graduation came, it was a happy day, exciting, but I felt like, I don't know, I'm not feeling that excitement as much as I thought I would be feeling it when I've held back for this long to get to this point. And yeah, you know, so with this whole experience, I just thought to myself, regardless of what ends up happening after we move, I am just going to enjoy this experience. There's been things that are not favorable, you know, that have happened. As a lot of you may know, I recently was let go from my job. I got laid off. So there's been a number of things along the way that were not, you know, the nicest of things that could happen. But throughout the entire process, this is definitely one of those things where I can say I have allowed myself to just enjoy the process, enjoy being in a different country, enjoy exploring things that I'm not used to, seeing things that are very different. And now that we are in a position where we are citizens, it's like, okay, yeah, we did this, and it's pretty exciting. So thank you all so much. Fez Fulfilled says, oh, wow, congratulations to you and your family. Great news. You got us for a moment. You know, when I was thinking about it, I was like, am I like just adding too much drama to this for no reason? But I'm like, let me just do it, just so you can come in, sit and listen through these other reasons that I do think are very important to know and be aware of when it comes to moving from another country, becoming a permanent resident in another country, just to be mindful that this is home, but it's not home, you know, because where you are a citizen, nobody's going to say go back home if you would do something that, you know, ends up getting you on the wrong side of the law, for example, or medical reasons, as all of the things that I stated, right? So I'm really happy that I think it worked. What I was trying to do definitely worked. And if any of you do have any questions when it comes to maybe becoming a Canadian citizen, drop them in the comments. I do want to just make sure that you are understanding what the process looks like, but from a very high level from our end. not really just from our end, but if you move as someone who has permanent residency, you generally need to stay in Canada for a minimum of 3 years. So you need to be present in Canada for a minimum of 3 years, excuse me, be able to submit your income taxes for the last 3 years. And you'll also need to submit proof that you are able to speak the English language. And this is one for me where I'm like, when I moved to the country 3 years ago, I had to do this language test where you actually get to see whether I understand the language or not. And that's how I came. But they want to see that when you are applying to become a citizen again. And then you will also submit any police clearances that you had. And for us, we didn't go back and reapply for new police clearances from places that we had to get them from when we were applying for the permanent residency. So that's just something to keep in mind, because yeah, just depending on how you worked the 5 years that you'd have in your permanent residency, in that duration that they give you for your permanent residency, if you know that you'd need to go and find something somewhere else, then you would need to apply, like, and get that police clearance. Sorry. So let me just have a look at some of the comments. So, hi, Busi, were you required to learn French and take another English test? So, no, we were not required to learn French. As long as you know one of the official languages and you can write the test and pass that, that should be enough. With the English test, we didn't take another English test because the one that we had, it was enough. Like, that was enough for them to see that we are able to conduct in and speak like the language. So we didn't have to do a completely new one. Okay, and then Emandleni says, hi, Busi, I saw that you worked at Salesforce. I am on track to be a Salesforce certified application architect. Are there job options in the field over there? So now this is one where I would say go to the Salesforce website, maybe go to their page on LinkedIn and just have a look at what they have open. I don't know whether they have any jobs for architects that are open, but the best place to find that information would be on their website or on a place like LinkedIn where they would post if they have openings. But the best place I would say is just go to their website directly, because sometimes companies will have jobs that are open and they don't necessarily go and post it on LinkedIn, like, for whatever reason, I don't know. But I think their website would be the best place for you to check if there are opportunities. But a lot of companies, I think, because even when you look at the ecosystem that Salesforce works with, there could be a number of partners as well that they work with that you could work for and be able to use your Salesforce, the skills that you have with Salesforce. But yeah, I would just encourage that you check their website and maybe even networking with some people who you see are in a similar role as you who work at Salesforce. So just have a look at the locations that you're interested in. If you're finding people, reach out to them and let them know that, hey, I'm this person. Maybe I just did 1, 2, 3. I'm looking to get an opportunity in this space and I'd love to connect with you. And then don't connect just because you're saying, hey, like, do you have opportunities to share with me? But connect with them in a sense that you are in a space that I would love to be in and I'd love to be connected with you. And then from there, who knows, like, people generally will share if there's opportunities in the space that they work in. So that's something that could work in your favor. Okay, so that is pretty much in a nutshell what I had to share with all of you today. I don't see any other questions come in. Let me just have a look. Emanleni says, fantastic sound advice. Thank you. No, you're welcome. You're welcome. One of the biggest things in finding a job abroad, especially if you are still living outside of the country, maybe that you want to move in, I do think networking is a big part of it. And it's pretty difficult. Like, I mean, I've been on the other side and it's pretty difficult for you to get people who have never met you before to even respond to a message. Like, I had situations where the company I was still working for before I moved, I would reach out to people internally and say, hey, I'm going to be moving to Canada in X amount of time. I'd love to connect, whatever the case is. And some people just never bothered to respond. So you might find yourself getting people, a whole bunch of people who will look at your message and carry on with their lives. So don't let that deter you, because you will find someone. You will likely find someone. And I think if you find people who are also in a similar position where they've been immigrants and they understand what it's like to be on the other side, that's where I think you usually have a better chance of getting someone to respond. But if you're reaching out to somebody who maybe might not even understand what you're going through, I think that's where you can get a bit more of resistance. So just keep that in mind if you are reaching out to a bunch of people, that there's a lot of people who will just not give you the time of day. And it's purely because they might not know you, and maybe they do have a number of other people who are reaching out. So CC Mabena says, do you have dual citizenship? Yes, we have dual citizenship. As I mentioned a bit earlier in the video, you have to apply to retain your South African citizenship, and you will get, it's like a letter, like you'll get something that states that you can take up the citizenship of another place. So you have to get that letter before, and then you can take up the citizenship of another place. But if you don't do that as a South African and think that it's just going to be automatic, you'll find yourself having lost your citizenship in South Africa when you never renounced it, you never did anything besides taking up the citizenship of another place. So we are dual citizens. We are officially South African Canadians. Like I still I still have to kind of think about it for a second when I have to say it. I'm like, yeah, South African Canadians. Yes, I'm a South African Canadian. Okay, so Khan's Freddy says, I'm doing my PhD in accounting, but I wish to look for a job in Canada as a lecturer. What is your advice? I think in this instant, it would also be a similar thing. Network with people who are in that field, like find out what it would take for you to be able to make that transition, into being a lecturer in the space that you want to be in. I think that would be one of the biggest things. Just find someone who's already in the space, have a conversation with them. If you're not already maybe understanding what would be required for you to be able to make that transition. I remember when I made a transition in my own career, I spoke to a whole bunch of people who were already doing what I looked at and thought I would like to get into this space. I have done my own research. There's things I've looked up, but there's so much more that I think I still have questions on. So get clear on things that are not very clear for you, and then try and find people that you can speak to just to give you guidance and direction, because those would be the best people to say, okay, start doing XYZ, and this is going to help you be more competitive. It's going to help you show up in a different way when you are trying to go for those roles and get a job as a lecturer in one of the institutions this side. So that is the one thing that I would definitely advise that you do. So Ndaya says, hi, Busi, you're just special. Thank you. I was worried, but you cooled us down. Please do for us a clear video for where's how to submit and also express entry. I need to ask questions in that session. What exactly, like, have you gone to the website, like where's.org? If you go to where's.org, can you, if you can explain and just let me know, and you can maybe have a look at it at a different time, then come back to this video on and comment what exactly your question might be, because you have to sign up on Where's, register, have a profile on there, and they have their step-by-step requirements in terms of what they would want to see from you, which would be your transcripts from the university. So sealed transcripts coming from your university. And when I did it, when we were doing it with my husband, you could either have the university send them directly, or you could go fetch them yourself, or have the university send them to you, not open the sealed envelope that they send to you, and then you send it directly to Wes. But there was a process after the COVID period where I heard people say you can now even do it electronically somehow. I think the university and Wes will communicate themselves directly. So if you could just, be super specific in terms of what exactly you're finding challenging when you're going through the Wes website, just to navigate how to do that process, I will be more than happy to do that video. And when it comes to the express entry, that there is a video on my channel already. I have a video already where I'm going through where you would go to see all the requirements and then start your profile. In terms of actually doing like a thing where I'm going through starting a profile, it wouldn't exactly work because you need to actually put details in there. I think maybe if there was somebody who works with the government of Canada and they have a test profile or something that you can go through and show someone, it would probably work. But as somebody who's like me, like if I have to actually register just to take you through the process, I don't think that would work. But I would highly encourage that you at least just start like where's.org, go to the website and then sign up and look at their requirements. What do they want? What are they asking from you? It was pretty straightforward. And that's why I say just try and go through it first, and then you will be able to do that. So Pindile says, do you apply with the SA government to retain the citizenship? Yes, you apply with the SA government if you would be in the country that you are living in. So for example, with us here in Canada, we had to go to the Consulate General of South Africa. So there's forms that we could download online from the government of South Africa. And then we filled those forms in and we had to provide our ID documents, so ID from South Africa. We had to provide copies of our permanent residency cards, and there'll be a fee. Like there was a fee, but it was maybe, I think it was $23, something like that. So it's not a very steep amount. And then you will send that application to them. You will also take an envelope where they will send the letter that states that, okay, yes, you are you're a South African citizen, you're retaining your citizenship, and you can take up the citizenship of whatever country you stated in your application you want to take the citizenship of. And it takes roughly around a month. Maybe if there would be things happening that delay the process, it could potentially take longer, but they say it takes around a month, and that was also our experience. So it didn't take a very long time. And let's see, Priscilla says, wow, Busi, these are awesome news. Congratulations to you and your family. Thank you very much. Thank you so much. So Nolly says, I just joined now. What is the process of moving with your kids in Canada? Does a sponsor really take you in? And if so, for how long? The process of moving to Canada, I have a bunch of videos already on the channel, so I would encourage you to go through the immigration playlist that I have on my page. And if you do have a family member that can sponsor you in Canada already, go to canada.ca, and that is where you'll be able to see what requirements they have of that sponsor. So they're very specific in terms of who can sponsor who to come to Canada. So you can sponsor your parents, for example, like my husband and I would be able to sponsor our parents to come. If you hadn't come with your kids and maybe you didn't put them in your application initially for whatever reason, you can also sponsor a child, one of your children to come with. You can sponsor a sibling, but if it's a sibling, you have to be able to prove that their main guardian or parent, and the sibling has to be under 18. Like they have to still be a minor. They have to be under 18, and you have to be able to prove that they don't have a guardian or anyone else to look after them, and you are the next best person, I guess, to be able to do that. But again, go to canada.ca. Like that's where you find the most accurate information. I'm not an immigration consultant, and there may be information that I might not know that would be pertaining to your unique situation, you know? So Clara says, hello, family. Hi, Clara. I'm late thanks to load shedding. Oh, I'm so sorry. I am so sorry. But you're here now. You're here now. And the video is also going to be replayed on LinkedIn. So, not LinkedIn, YouTube. It's going to be replayed on YouTube. So, Tammy says to add, as a dual citizen, you are required by law to use the South African passport to enter and leave South Africa. Oh yes, that is another big one, because for us, our boys' passports, South African passports expired. You know, for kids, you can only get their passport for up to 5 years, and they had their passport like when we left South Africa, they had their passport for a bit of a while, so the passport has expired. And we need to renew that because that's the passport that they need to use if we are entering South Africa, and that's the passport we'll have to use if we are leaving South Africa. And then CC says, I'm sorry to deviate from the topic on hand. Is a layoff in Canada the same as a retrenchment in South Africa? Did they notify the staff about the plans to lay you off, or was it like the Amazon and Google layoffs? So we spoke about this in last week's live. CC, if you have time, I would highly encourage that you go and check that live out. But here in Canada, being laid off is basically similar to what a retrenchment, what's recorded as a retrenchment in South Africa. But because different countries will require different things from employers, in South Africa, I mentioned it on that live as well. From what I saw, there was just a process, and you would be notified and know that you might be impacted, right, by a retrenchment. Here, it wasn't. It wasn't that. Like I woke up one morning super early. I got a phone call. I was on PTO. I was on leave, personal time off. And that's how I found out that I had been laid off. So fun times, right? Living in North America. So here in North America, it doesn't seem to be something that the government seems is a requirement or is needed, which is very crazy to me because you're kind of messing with people's livelihoods. You're messing with people's livelihoods. But yeah, it's pretty different, but we did touch on it in a bit more detail in the previous live. Okay, so let me just see a couple more questions and then we can wrap things up. So Neo says, is it easier to get a spousal visa, or would I need to go through the express entry process? I don't know which one I would say is easier, but just thinking about it, if you have a spouse, I think that would make a bit more sense and be maybe less things that they would require from you. But I haven't gone through the spousal visa process. I do know somebody though who has done that with their husband, and maybe that's somebody I can bring on the channel if it's something you're interested in hearing about. I encourage you to drop any specific questions maybe that you might have about it, and I could see into having a conversation with them. I know someone who brought their spouse through the spousal sponsorship, but I don't know if I'd say it's easier to go through express entry, because just because I went through it, I'll look at it and say, I think there's a lot more documents and things that they will need from you, like a proof of funds or a job offer and, all of these things. But if it's your spouse who's bringing you over, like that's your person, that's your partner. But I can't say this one is easier or that other one is easier. Okay. The 750 days of being present in Canada, is it consecutive? How many days can I be out of the country to maintain the PR status for the duration of the 5 years? It doesn't have to be continuous. Nope, it does not have to be continuous. You could be in for 15 days, you're in for a month, 3 months, 5 months, whatever that looks like. It just depends. Like it depends on you, but they look at it overall. Like in that entire 5 years, have you been present for at least 750? So you could even go for 6 months not laying a foot in Canada, but as long as in that 5 years you have a combination of 750 days in whatever whatever combination like that would look like. So yeah, like I think I will wrap it up here today because I don't want to spend super, super, super long, but I am super excited and happy that you were all able to join, and that it's not all bad news. It's like I had bad news last week, pretty sad news that I lost my job. But I hope you were able to take a couple of things here and there from today's session just to understand, how you could potentially lose your permanent residency if you do move to Canada or any other country. Like I encourage you to look into that so you know exactly, how you can protect yourself and keep yourself in the right circles that are not going to have you doing things that could potentially endanger you. So thank you all so, so much for joining. Make sure you are following me on Instagram. I do have my handle there at the bottom, Instagram or TikTok. That's where I generally will announce if I am going live and the topic that we're going to be talking about. So you can start thinking of like all the questions that you might have that you want to ask. And if I have put the live up, please do feel free to go in underneath that live if you have some questions that you think you want to ask, and ask those questions that are related to that topic. And I'll make sure that it's something I look at and I comment on. So thank you all for watching, and I will see you on the next video.
Thank you for watching.